This is a Libyan word, meaning in our language hills, and the bristly-haired, as they are called. There are also weasels found in the Sophilim, very like to the weasels of Tartessus. So many are the wild creatures of the nomad's country, as far as by our utmost inquiry we have been able to learn. Next to the Maxis of Libya are the Zakis, whose women drive their chariots to war. Next to these are the Gazantes, where much honey is made by bees, and much more yet, so it is said, by craftsmen. It is certain that they all paint themselves with vermilion and eat apes, with which their mountains swarm. Off their coasts, the Carthaginians say, lies an island called Siraeus, 25 miles long and narrow across, accessible from the mainland. It is full of olives and vines. It is said that there is a lake on this island from which the maidens of the country draw gold dust out of the mud on feathers smeared with pitch. I do not know whether this is true, I just write what is said. But all things are possible, for I myself saw pitch drawn from the water of a pool in Zacynthus. The pools there are enormous; the greatest of them is 70 feet long and broad, and 12 feet deep. Into this they drop a pole with a myrtle branch fastened to its end, and bring up pitch on the myrtle, smelling like asphalt, and for the rest better than the pitch of Perea. Then they pour it into a pit that they have dug near the pool, and when a fair amount is collected there, they fill their vessels from the pit. Whatever falls into the pool is carried under the ground and appears again in the sea, which is about half a mile distant from the pool. So then, the story that comes from the island lying off the Libyan coast is like the truth too. Another story is told by the Carthaginians. There is a place in Libya, they say, where men live beyond the Pillars of Heracles. They come here and unload their cargo; then, having laid it in order along the beach, they go aboard their ships and light a smoking fire. The people of the country see the smoke, and coming to the sea, they lay down gold to pay for the cargo, and withdraw from the wares. Then the Carthaginians disembark and examine the gold; if it seems to them a fair price for their cargo, they take it and go away, but if not, they go back aboard and wait, and the people come back and add more gold until the sailors are satisfied. In this transaction, it is said, neither party defrauds the other. The Carthaginians do not touch the gold until it equals the value of their cargo, nor do the people touch the cargo until the sailors have taken the gold. These are all the Libyans whom we can name, and the majority of their kings cared nothing for the king of the Medes at the time of which I write, nor do they care for him now. I have this much further to say of this country: 4 nations and no more, as we know it, inhabited it, 2 of which are aboriginal and 2 not. The Libyans in the north and the Ethiopians in the south of Libya are aboriginal; the Phoenicians and Greeks are later settlers. In my opinion, there is in no part of Libya any great excellence for which it should be compared to Asia or Europe, except in the region which is called by the same name as its river, Sinops. But this region is a match for the most fertile farmland in the world, nor is it at all like the rest of Libya. For the soil is black and well watered by springs, and has no fear of drought, nor is it harmed by drinking excessive showers. There is rain in this part of Libya. Its yield of grain is of the same measure as in the land of Babylon. The land inhabited by the Eusphiritae is also good; it yields at the most 100-fold, but the land of the Sinops region yields 300-fold. The country of Cyrene, which is the highest part of Libya that nomads inhabit, has the marvellous advantage of 3 harvest seasons. The fruits of the earth are ripe for reaping and picking on the coast first; when these have been gathered, the middle region above the coast, which they call the hills, is ripe for gathering; and no sooner has this yield of the middle country been gathered, than the highest lying crops are mellow and ripe, so that the latest fruits of the earth are coming in when the earliest are already spent by way of food and drink. Thus the Cyreneans have a harvest lasting 8 months. Enough of these matters then. Now, when the Persians that Ariandes sent from Egypt to avenge Pharatime came to Bars, they laid siege to the city, demanding the surrender of those who were guilty of the murder of Archesilaus; but the Barsaeans, those whose whole people were accessory to the deed, would not yield. The Persians besieged Bars for 9 months, digging underground passages leading to the walls, and making violent assaults. As for the tunnels, a blacksmith discovered them by the means of a bronze shield, and this is how he found them. Carrying the shield around the inner side of the walls, he struck it against the ground of the city. All the other places which he struck returned a dull sound, but where there were tunnels, the bronze of the shield rang clear. Here the Barcians made a counter-tunnel and killed those Persians who were digging underground. Thus the tunnels were discovered, and the assaults were repelled by the townsfolk. When much time had been spent, and many on both sides, not less of the Persians than their enemies, slain, Amasis, the general of the foot soldiers, devised a plot, knowing that Bars would not be taken by force, but might be taken by guile. He dug by night a wide trench and laid frail planks across it, which he then covered over with a layer of earth level with the ground about it. Then when day came, he invited the Barcians to confer with him, and they readily consented. At last all agreed to conditions of peace. This was done thus. Standing on the hidden trench, they gave and accepted a sworn assurance that their treaty would hold good while the ground where they stood was unchanged. The Barcians promised to pay a due sum to the king, and the Persians to do the Barcians no harm. When the sworn agreement was made, the townsfolk, trusting in it and opening all their gates, themselves came out of the city, and let all their enemies who so desired to enter within the walls. But the Persians broke down the hidden bridge and ran into the city. They broke down the bridge that they had made, so that they might keep the oath which they had sworn to the Barcians, namely, that this treaty would hold good for as long as the ground remained as it was, but if they broke the bridge the treaty held good no longer. When they were delivered to her by the Persians, Pharatime took the most guilty of the Barcians and set them impaled around the top of the wall. The breasts of their women she cut off and planted around the wall in like manner. As for the rest of the Barcians, she told the Persians to take them as their booty, except those who were of the house of Battus and not accessory to the murder. To these she turned over the city. The Persians thus enslaved the rest of the Barcians and went home. When they appeared before the city of Cyrene, the Cyrenaeans let them pass through their city, so that a certain oracle might be fulfilled. As the army was passing through, Badres, the admiral of the fleet, was for taking the city, but Amasis, the general of the land army, would not consent, saying that he had been sent against Bars and no other Greek city. At last they passed through Cyrene and camped on the hill of Lycaean Zeus. There they regretted not having taken the city, and tried to enter it again, but the Cyrenaeans would not let them. Then, although no one attacked them, panic seized the Persians, and they fled to a place 7 miles distant and camped there, and while they were there, a messenger from Ariandes came to the camp asking them to return. The Persian asked and received from the Cyrenaeans provisions for their march, after which they left to go to Egypt, but then they fell into the hands of the Libyans, who killed the laggards and stragglers of the army for the sake of their garments and possessions, until at last they came to Egypt. This Persian force advanced as far as Euspheridae in Libya and no farther. As for the Barcians, whom they had taken for slaves, they carried them from Egypt into banishment and brought them to the king, and Darius gave them a town of Bactria to live in. They gave this town the name Bars, and it remained an inhabited place in Bactria until my own lifetime. But Pharatime did not end well either, for as soon as she had revenged herself on the Barcians and returned to Egypt, she met an awful death. For while still alive she teemed with maggots. Thus does over-brutal human revenge invite retribution from the gods. That of Pharatime, daughter of Battus, against the Barcians, was revenge of this nature and this brutality. End of Volume 2, Part 8.